Guys, I have Kevin Boehm today. Kevin has opened over 40 restaurants in the last 27 years now?
30 years?
30 years. You're talking about 40 restaurants. And this is a business that is one of the most ruthless businesses in the world.
I lost $1 million.
$1 million on the Nashville restaurant you lost. You're how old?
So I was 30.
30, you lose $1 million.
I turned 0 into $1 million and lost it all.
You just said with your parents coming from sort of blue collar, just average, middle income workers, you didn't necessarily have that funding or support, right?
No. I, was helping finance myself through college. And then, my story really is I'm at school and I was surrounded by a lot of people who knew exactly what they wanted to do. Then got a room at a boarding house. I was working at an amusement park. And then I wrote a fake resume and I talked my way into a server's job at the Beach House restaurant in Panama City, Florida. And that changed my life.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the More We Know podcast. My name is Mir, your host. The More We Know podcast is the world's mentorship platform. It is a top 5% podcast in the world for people looking for a mentor in their pocket. Every single month, we bring on different mentors to provide you a real-life mentor, whether you're in school, whether you're at home, whether you're at your friend's house, wherever you're at, we provide you a mentor in your pocket. A lot of people don't get access to mentorship, so we try to democratize that access by bringing on some of the best in the world to be your mentor. We brought on people like the former CEO of Chipotle, the founder of Reebok, and the mayor of Miami. Yet I am just so excited for today's episode. I was just spending some time with Kevin right before this episode, and I can just tell you guys personally, this is probably one of the ones I'm most excited for just because of the stuff that I learned in a couple minutes. So I'm only going to be shocked to hear what we talk about for the next hour or so. So guys, I have Kevin Boehm today. Kevin has opened over 40 restaurants in the last 27 years now.
30 years?
30 years. You're talking about 40 restaurants. And this is a business that is one of the most ruthless businesses in the world. I mean, this is one where you see all these restaurants going under. So I'm going to give you guys a quick background, but Kevin's going to share a story. But after opening over 40 restaurants over the last 40 years, Kevin won the James Beard Award, and he's become one of the nation's foremost visionaries in the field of hospitality. Alongside with his partner, Rob Katz, they have built a restaurant group based on great chefs, inspired design, and enlightened hospitality. They are the founder, and he's the co-CEO of the Boka Group. Kevin, I can't even begin to talk about the awards, the accolades, where you've been, the restaurants you've had, the revenue it's generated, the hospitality it's impacted for people. But I just want the audience to really sit down and listen to the person that we're speaking today because your experiences are first class, and just thank you for being on today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the nice build up there. I appreciate it. Very nice. I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Let's dive right into it then. So I mentioned a little bit of a background. You're the co-founder and co-CEO of the Boka Group.
Yes.
Before we go and dive back into your background, just help me introduce yourself. What is the Boka Group for someone that might have not heard of it?
Yeah, Boka Restaurant Group here in Chicago. We are a chef-driven restaurant group, which means we have restaurants in Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. And in every one of those restaurants, we have a chef partner. So when Rob and I were building the architecture of Boka Restaurant Group some 20 years ago, sitting at the bar, writing on the back of cocktail napkins, we decided we wanted to build our company around multiple chefs, that we would be able to do more things, more breadth, take more chances if we found great chefs. And the real trick back then was, how are we going to get these chefs to work for two knuckleheads like us? So it took a little while, but now we have 6 amazing chef partners in 3 different cities. And, we are really into design, inspired hospitality, great food. And then underneath that, enough financial responsibility to make a restaurant go, which is no easy task. And it gets harder all the time.
Yeah. And opening up one restaurant is tough. Opening up 40, that's a whole different mission and journey that we're going to dive into. I don't know.
Well, I kept a journal, and everybody out there, keep a journal. It's the greatest thing I ever did. 1992 to 1995, I have a journal, and in it, I wrote, perfect world scenario. I'll have 9 restaurants. For some reason, I had 9 restaurants in 9 different cities, and some of them were in Europe, so it was really stupid. But I was like, if everything goes perfectly, I'm going to have 1 in Copenhagen and 1 in London and 1 in Paris. So 9 was like, what I thought was everything. So, there's a great line in broadcast news where they say, what do you do when your, reality actually exceeds your dreams? And Albert Brooks says you keep it to yourself. So where I ended up was much bigger than I ever thought would happen.
Yeah, and we're going to dive into that. I mean, for the Chicago specific listeners, if you know you've been involved in Kevin's life, if you've gone to places like Les Select, if you've gone to GT Prime, if you've gone to Mamatero, if you've gone to Boka, which is 13 consecutive years Michelin. But prior to all this, that's amazing. But walk us through who was Kevin as a child? What did your parents do?
Yeah, so my mom was one of 14 kids who grew up on a farm, to understand my mom. So at age 6, she was part of farm labor, getting up at 4:30 in the morning. Rough childhood. My mom worked for Montgomery Ward, just like on the shipping docks at the mall. My dad worked at a little tiny insurance company. We, a family of 4, grew up in a 700 square foot house. Nothing to do with the restaurant business, and worlds away from fine dining or fine food. The kind of food I ate at home was, white rice with ground beef and Campbell's cream of mushroom soup poured on top. I mean, we did not have a gourmet house. But for some reason, I think because we weren't fancy, I was intrigued with stuff that was. And so there's a lot of TV icons at the time that I really liked Jack Tripper a lot. And Jack Tripper was a chef on Three's Company. And so I think that might've been first. And then, Rick on Magnum PI had a bar. And so I saw those little things, but I was also I watched Dynasty and I'm like, why is Alexis Carrington eating caviar? That looks amazing. And so I remember going to a buffet on Mother's Day and there being oysters and all these interesting things. I was probably 12 or 13 years old, Southern Air restaurant. And that was the fanciest dinner we'd ever gone to ever before. And I was hooked from that. And then I started watching food shows on TV and looking at cookbooks and telling my parents I wanted to open up my own restaurant, even though I didn't know really what that meant. And,
because sometimes you hear stories of people that were very fortunate backgrounds. Maybe their parents were tech CEOs or they had a lot of money that helped fund it. What's interesting about your background is, based on what you just said, with your parents coming from sort of blue collar, just average, middle income workers, you didn't necessarily have that funding or support, right?
No, I, was helping finance myself through college. And then, my story really is I'm at school and I was surrounded by a lot of people who knew exactly what they wanted to do. I was pre-law, not really that excited about it. And, I had 2 housemates that became legends. One, Mike Hopkins, was the commander of the SpaceX mission, but before that was the last American astronaut in space in the NASA program. And then the other Pulitzer Prize finalist, Dave Eggers. And Dave was giving me shit one night about, you don't want to be a lawyer. And I'm like, you're right, I actually don't. And he goes, well, what do you really want to do? And I'm like, well, it's kind of cheesy. It was 1989, restaurants weren't as cool as they are now. And he's like, well, what is it? And I go, well, I kind of want to open up my own restaurant. And he goes, well, why aren't you doing that? And I go, I don't know. I don't know anybody who does it. I don't have any money to open up one. And he goes, Kevin, Mike thinks he's going to be an astronaut. I was like, touche. And so, just several months later, I dropped out of college. I convinced myself, you know what? I'm going to go work for a legitimate restaurant. And the only problem was I didn't know what a legitimate restaurant was, and I didn't know where it was. So if I was smart, I would have gone to Chicago or New York or San Francisco or New Orleans or these great restaurant cities. I went to the Panhandle of Florida. I thought, you know what? Tourists, and it's right on the water, and fresh fish. That was my rationalization. I ended up in Panama City, couldn't get a job. Ended up homeless for a little while.
Homeless?
just for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, wow.
Lived in my car.
How old were you?
And I was 19.
And living in your car at 19?
Living in my car at 19. And then got a room at a boarding house. I was working at an amusement park. And then I wrote a fake resume. And I talked my way into a server's job at the Beach House restaurant in Panama City, Florida. And that changed my life.
So how much were you making?
At the amusement park, $4.25 an hour.
Okay.
But when I go into the Beach House, I remember one of my first shifts, I made like $140, and I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. This is amazing.
Yeah.
But I was most intrigued by the people that were working in the restaurant. I was like, these people are kind of brilliant, and they're a little bit dangerous. They knew a lot about food and wine and music. And and film and life, and they were interesting, and they stayed out late, and I just dug the culture. You know, when the pandemic came about, I remember talking to a lot of politicians who didn't understand who the people in restaurants were. And it's a really interesting group of people for people who aren't in the restaurant business. You have a lot of people in the back that are these true artisans who've, you know, put their heart and soul into cooking. And they're kind of trying to win a lottery ticket, you know, and some do. I work with some that have. Stephanie Izard, for one, you know, who we have 8 restaurants with, who's struck gold in the restaurant business. But in the front of the house, it was a mix of people who were doing it for life because they really wanted to take care of people, but also people that were like trying to be a musician or trying to be an actor or that sort of thing. And it was this brilliant melting pot of just cool people that were really fun to be in a foxhole with, and then really fun to drink tequila with afterwards. And so I was making money, and I was interested. I was focused on something for the first time in my life. So I went looking for like a purpose, and actually what I found was like a community and a home. So that group of people at the beach house became like my first restaurant family. And I met my second business partner at that restaurant, and I met my girlfriend, who was my first business partner at that restaurant. So
that same restaurant.
And the woman who owned it, Alice Masker, was my first mentor. So it was kind of everything to me at that point.
And so, you know, one of the reasons we have this mentorship platform is because of the fact that a lot of people, Gen Zs, 20, 21, 22, feel like it's tough to get mentors, or feel like it's tough to go and ask someone like you at where you're at in your business life now to mentor me, because, you know, they look at it like, you know, what can I provide for that person? So how did you go about getting her as your mentor?
Well, you're not going to know the answer if you don't get the question, if you don't ask the question. And most people, like, I very rarely say no if somebody asks me for a cup of coffee. I mean, sometimes my life's too crazy to do that. But
even now at the Pinnacle.
Even now, when people ask me, hey man, can I have 15 minutes with you? I'm like, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go. But Alice wanted everybody in that restaurant to be better. And I probably was annoying at some points, but I just wanted to know everything. I'm like, you know, how much does that sandwich unit cost there? You know, and yeah, why is that like that? Or, you know, how do you check out at the end of the night? How do you keep track of all this stuff? And how much of the tips have to go on the check? I mean, like, I kept a binder, and I just started asking questions as I would walk through a restaurant each night. I was like, what are the things that I don't know that I'm going to need to know when I own a restaurant? And, you know, fortunately, she always answered my questions.
Yeah. And it's sort of this concept of polite persistence, right? You walk a fine line with it. So
you do.
Tell us, how many years did you spend there before transitioning into the next venture or launch? Or?
Well, I worked 6 doubles a week. And so for, you know, a couple of years, and I used to shove my money into envelopes. So one job was my money that I lived off of, and the other job was the money that I was saving up to open up my own restaurant. So I would shove money into an envelope, and I would lick it, and I would seal it. And at the end of the week, I would take my 6 envelopes, and I'd rip them open, and I had a passbook savings account. For those of you that are not as old as I am, you go into the bank and they would actually stamp your balance on a little book. And I had a certain number in my mind of what I was going to open up my first restaurant with. And so I just kept working until I hit that number. And, you know, 2.5 years later, it was time to give notice at both those restaurants. And I hadn't done a lot of talking about it. You know, I hadn't, you know, said like, oh, I'm going to open up my own restaurant. I was kind of doing it quietly. And myself and my girlfriend, we took off, went to Seaside, Florida, which was like 70 miles away. It's now 30A. The road it's on is iconic. It's like, you know, New York Times did a huge story on Alice Beach. It's the hottest real estate in Florida. It's, but at the time I was the 10th restaurant on that road. There's probably 800 restaurants now. And we went out there and opened up the world's most modest restaurant, stuck together with bubble gum and Scotch tape. And it was called the Lazy Days Cafe. I was restaurant 1. She was the chef. You know, we did everything. We washed every dish, waited on every table. You know, I would set up garde manger and do salads. She would do all the hot food. And it was a trip, man. It was a trip. One of the lines from my journal that I kept was, I'm not sure if this restaurant will ever fill my pockets, but it sure as hell fills my soul. And so it was between the beach house and that, I'd finally, you know, I had been a guy who'd suffered from depression from an early age, even though I really hadn't put a finger on it back then. I was, I hadn't self-diagnosed myself at that point, but I just thought that, I hadn't found the right thing or found the right people. And then I found my people and my purpose. And it was this beautiful shot of adrenaline and dopamine that I needed at the time.
And does, because a lot of times now, especially as it's talked about more, people correlate depression to a certain monetary value. What was the depression getting better due to income going up?
No, really, now that I have 52 years of experience with
52.
I'm 52.
You look 35, man.
Hey,
Come
that's
on.
nice of you to say. I was just used to tell people that I was a lot of 9s and 10s and 1s and 2s. And I was a guy who was constantly trying to do big projects because those big projects gave me manic moments. And those manic moments I classified as happiness. They weren't really happiness. They were manic moments. And I would then crash afterwards, and then I would need something else on the horizon to work towards. So when somebody asked me like, yeah, how does a kid from the other side of the tracks in Springfield, Illinois get to 40 restaurants? Well, part of it was this, I've been working on a book for a few years, and the title of it is The Bottomless Cup, because I just kept trying to fill a cup up that wouldn't fill. The mind is an interesting thing. So the restaurant business was an awfully good Band-Aid though, for me, and probably saved my life.
When you say saved your life, were there moments in your life where you had suicidal thoughts?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There have been 2 times in my life that I've gotten to that dark of a place. So, fortunately over the years, through everything from the Hoffman process to medication to therapy to all of it, I'm in a good place now. But I didn't really settle into a therapist till I was 49 years old.
49. Just a few years ago.
Just a few years ago.
Wow. And would you say now?
I'm a slow learner.
Yeah. Would you say now that, do you feel like do you still suffer through it?
I do. Yeah. It's kind of like, yoga's a practice, when, if you're an alcoholic, you're never cured, it's better and I can manage it, but I don't think it's ever going to be perfect for me, but I'm probably in a better state than I've ever been in my life.
Yeah. And the reason, I know we're trying to walk through your story, but the reason I'm hammering on it a bit is because it's almost emotional in the sense that, myself and so many people my age, we look at social media now. You grew up in an environment, not aging you, but you grew up without the Instagrams and the Snapchats. And so we now go on Instagram, you open up your phone and we see the makeup. I see everyone's living great. And honestly, even in your capacity, when I put up a few weeks ago, hey, I'm going to be interviewing Kevin Boehm soon, co-founder of Boka Group, one of the best in the US. What questions do you have? Everything kept correlating to the awards that you've won, the scalability of these restaurants. I love Les Select, all this. And so from the outside looking in, it just looks like you have it perfect. Like it just looks like happy life. It's the best businesses. How do you I
think when you're younger, especially with Instagram and social media these days, I don't think everybody understands their own personal currencies of success. And so if you look at mine, it's connection and the fact that anything that I'm doing, I'm actually like really connected to. Mm-hmm. That means the people I'm having dinner with, and that means the job and the work that I'm doing. Love in a sense that love of self, and I know the people that I love and I know the people that love me. Mm-hmm. Freedom of being able to wake up in the morning and not feel trauma or shame or guilt or stress or fear or not wanting to go to my job. And then transparency of self. Here's who I am. Here are the ABCs of me. Some people are going to like it, some people aren't, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And so everything now in my life kind of tears back to that. And the whole Instagram world, in a world that I've been in and a guy who posts stuff, it can be dangerous. Mm-hmm. Because it does give you, you post something and you see what the reaction you get to it, and it gives you little shots of dopamine. It's a dangerous little drug, man. And yes, everybody posts the best of themselves on those things. So if you're looking you might post the best of yourselves, but you know what's really there. Mm-hmm. And then when you look at everybody else, you think that's reality. Even though you know you're showing the glossiest portions of you, you think, but with them, it's for real. You know, they go to the best parties and wear the best dresses and they look so great, even though, you know, there's 7 filters on or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I definitely know and understand that game. And I think there's more depression problems than ever because of that. And so, yeah, I'm a completely different human than I was 20 years ago. I was an extroverted extrovert for a long, long time. I spent a lot of time in solitude and with myself now. And I try to get as little happiness as possible from outside sources. You know, if you're depending upon all that stuff all the time, it becomes a crutch.
Well, it sounds like Kevin's going to be talking about this a lot in his book, so we're going to keep track and keep him accountable for when the book launches, so we can share with the community.
There you go. I appreciate it.
Is it possible for someone with your accolades and this, you know, the longevity of your business and, you know, the people that look up to you, is it possible for someone like you to suffer with imposter syndrome?
100%, million times, my whole life, for sure. You know, like, I talk to my kids about this all the time. Like, you know, you look at things when you're a kid and you're like, oh my God, a police officer or a doctor or a teacher, you know, they must be so brilliant. And what did they have to go through to get to that point? But once you get in the center of all these things, it demystifies them a little bit. Right. And I remember how I would come to Chicago and have dinner at Gordon or have dinner at Charlie Trotter's and just be like, well, I could never do that ever. Like, that's a Tom Cruise movie. I'm more like a character actor, you know, is what I thought about it. I'm like, you know, that's like jumping out of an airplane. I'm like, you know, I'm like Gary Sinise, you know, I'm a good, like, you know, second banana. And then and Rob, my partner, used to always say, he goes, we're middleweights. And so when we opened in Boka in Landmark and Perennial, we felt like that was our place. You know, like, okay, these guys in River North and Gold Coast, they do a totally different thing. And so, yeah, there are layers and there are levels of this imposter syndrome as time goes on. You know, holy shit, somebody's going to find me out at some point. When I first started actually managing people, I used to give out a deck of cards. And the deck of cards were the 15 things I thought made a good manager. And so it was like the ability to touch a table, giving pre-shift, wine knowledge, food knowledge, discipline, showing up on time, spirit, energy. And so there's a little picture on each card. It was a little hand-drawn thing. And I would give a manager a box with how many cards I thought they had. And then I would give them a card as soon as I thought they advanced to the next thing. I was trying to fill my deck of cards up at the same time they were. You know, I was a 26 years old when I was in Springfield, Illinois, managing 40 people that were all older than me for the most part.
At 26 years old?
Yeah, 26 in Springfield was a 135 seat restaurant. And, you know, there were people in there who knew a lot more than I did. So, you know, my special skill back then was 90% of success is just showing up. I worked really hard and I was trying to learn as I went. And so when you're building the plane while you're flying it, you're going to suffer from serious imposter syndrome, but it's a lot of strength in it too.
Yeah.
You know, I can look back now at myself and the fear that I had and all that stuff during those days. And I just, you know, like to give myself a hug.
Yeah, I know.
You know, God bless that poor young kid. He was always so fucking stressed out.
I mean, to go through that, like even the little things at 19, living in your car and leaving college. I mean, there's so much self-doubt that can fuel that in a certain capacity. So it's remarkable, but thanks for like being very transparent about the imposter syndrome side, because that isn't spoke about enough, because the makeup looks so good from the outside.
Oh, by the way, when I was sleeping on the beach, I talked to my mom on a payphone using her calling card one day, and she was like, well, how's your place? And I was like, Mom, you would not believe my view. I wasn't lying. I wasn't lying.
Very true with it, right? You have the best view in the city.
I did. I was like, it's incredible. You would not believe my ocean view.
Right on the beach.
Yeah, right on the Gulf, Mom.
That is awesome. So, okay, 26, you're managing this restaurant. You got how many employees you said?
26. I owned that restaurant. Yeah. And I was also the general manager of that restaurant at the same time. And it was like a staff of 40. And,
This is part of Boka Group?
No, this is pre-Boka Group. So I opened in 2 in Seaside, Florida, 1 in Springfield, Illinois, and 1 in Nashville, Tennessee before Boka.
Okay.
And then Rob Katz, my partner, had 4 bars in Chicago before Boka as well. And then we met up after that. But this was my bachelor's and master's degree in restaurants and Indigo was a huge step in that because that was my first legit restaurant. Like I remember as one of the 5 most happy moments of my life was completing that restaurant, designing it myself, building a lot of the stuff with my mom. Like my mom helped me build some chairs and stuff. She was super craftsy and her doing a lot of the painting and getting it done and being so proud of it. And my chef friend had driven in to help me and he walked in and he was like, dude, this is a real restaurant. Mm-hmm. And like my heart leaped out of my chest. I was so proud.
Wow.
So that was like the first thing that I everything was, out of my head onto paper and then into a building. We created something from nothing. And, not that the restaurants were nothing in Seaside, but they were really super modest. And the Springfield one looks like a real restaurant. It's still open.
It's still open.
It's been open, April 7th, it turned 25 years old.
25 years.
Yeah.
And did Boka end up absorbing that?
No, I sold it.
Oh, you sold it.
Yeah. Okay. So new owners.
Yeah. So at 26, you look at now between 24 to 26, the average college grad is making between 70,000 to maybe 100,000 by the time they're 26. To visualize the economics for us owning restaurants.
I did not make that amount of money yet.
Even at 26 with the restaurants you own.
No, I didn't. It's funny. I was still learning how to make money. I think in 1998, I probably made 60 grand.
And how many did you own?
Well, I was opening and selling.
Opening and selling. Okay, so you weren't.
So I opened my first one, sold it, put all that money into the second one, sold it, put all that money into the third one, sold it, put all that money into the fourth one.
Sold it. Okay.
So I was still living like a pauper.
So you weren't living like wealthier. Oh, wow.
No, I was like, driving my, beat up Honda CRX, or my really shitty Pontiac Grand Am that overheated all the time and, in a really crappy apartment. And all I wanted to do was have a nice restaurant.
And you were how old?
By the time I got to Nashville, I was 30.
And still at 30, you didn't have money?
No.
What?
So I had some real money when I sold Indigo. When I sold Indigo in Springfield, I had some real money, but I put it all into the next restaurant. So I had never at that point settled down and really spent money or bought anything nice or bought a nice car or anything. That really didn't happen for me until 40.
Come on.
Yeah. There was a massive change that happened then. So if you think about planting flowers, and everybody's so anxious to make crazy money right away. Those first 4 restaurants were, I was spinning, but Nashville was a failure for me. I went in there and I lost all that money.
The Nashville restaurant,
yeah.
which is
I kept doubling down and flipping. I went to Nashville, September 11th happened. The timing was bad. Going into the summer, I overbuilt it. I still owed the contractor money it was just terrible luck. And I lost all my money.
How much did you lose, if you don't mind sharing in that?
Yeah, I lost $1 million.
$1 million on the Nashville restaurant you lost. You're how old?
So I was 30.
30, you lose $1 million.
I turned 0 into $1 million and lost it all.
Come on.
Yeah.
What?
Devastating. Came to Chicago, tail between my legs.
No money. You're coming to Chicago.
No
you
money.
Got nothing.
Nothing.
You came off this nice momentum trend in your
Dude,
20s.
When Nashville opened, it was super hot too. I was like, why does everybody say this restaurant business is so hard? I figured this thing out. This is a piece of cake. People are stupid. And then I just got crushed in the balls. And so my mom actually gave me the advice. I could have gone back to Florida. People were willing to put up money to do a deal there. And the crazy thing was I'd never had an investor at this point. I've been using my own money.
That's all you
I'm just using my own money every single time. So I was just like, I don't want to listen to any investors and I don't even know how to do that. So when I got to Chicago and we did Boka, we took investor money. So I had a cup of coffee with Rob Katz. We decided what's the worst that could happen. Let's do something together. We got investors for that property. And so if you think about it, that opens in 2003, 20 years ago. Then we open Landmark and we get investors for that. Then we open Perennial and we get investors for that. Then we open Girl and the Goat and we get investors for that. But they all kind of really hit their big points all at the same time. So Boka paid off in 3 years. It paid off in 2006. So I'm starting to get like some distributions from that. So I'm doing a little bit better. And then, but Perennial and Girl and the Goat paid all its investors back in 9 months.
Girl and the Goat. So walk us through that visual. So
yes.
People education. So I give you 100,000.
I'll give you the numbers. We put 1.45 million into Girl and the Goat, which is a relative bargain.
Investor money or
investor money?
Did you guys also pool your own money in or no?
Nope. So back in those days, we would take like 65% ownership and we would give them 35% ownership for the entire raise of the restaurant.
And what's the conviction for the investor to say, hey, why should we give it to Kevin? Why don't we do it ourselves if he's not putting in money as well?
No, they're not operators. We're like saying we're good operators. We just open up 3 restaurants that are making money. Come and do this. And so with Girl and the Goat, it was during the world crash in 2008.
Yes.
We decided to do that restaurant at the end of 2008. And the first 10 people we asked said no. Now, it's one of the great restaurant investments in the history of restaurants. The first year, that restaurant made $2 million net profit.
Girl and the Goat made $2 million its first year.
Net profit first year.
Oh, that's
10 million
net.
gross.
10 million gross. We're just coming off the recession.
Coming off the recession.
Come on. Wow.
And so then we opened GT Fish, and GT Fish pays its investors back in 16 months. So now all of a sudden I have all these restaurants that I go from having a bunch of money, losing it all, then planting all these flowers with all these restaurants, and then they all flip. They all kind of flipped at the same time. And the flip was, as soon as the investors get all their money back, it converts to true equity. So the promote side, which was us, which was the 60% or the 65% or whatever, now we're getting our 60 or 65% of it. And sometimes that 60 or 65% would include, the chef's equities in that. And so that's not, the 65 was not mine. Yeah. Boka Restaurant Group was always only what Rob and I owned in every single restaurant.
What does that mean?
So Boka Restaurant Group was a holding company. And so if you look at it, it's the percentage that Rob and I own in every single restaurant. That's what Boka Restaurant Group is, LLC. Okay. And so it's like a Christmas tree. All that stuff goes to that and then distributes out to the people who own Boka Restaurant Group. And back then, Boka Restaurant Group was only owned by Rob and I. So we were both 50% ownership of Boka Restaurant Group. And then we would give chefs equity in each restaurant. But then after Girl and the Goat and GT Fish succeeded so much, we said, maybe we shouldn't be taking investors anymore. Mm-hmm. So after Little Goat, which opened the following year, Rob and I started self-financing all the restaurants.
And you never taken investor money again?
We didn't take any restaurant money from 2012 to 2022 for 10 years. We self-financed everything.
So the investors that got paid back from Girl and the Goat, are they still doing distributions today?
We bought them out at a certain point.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's making sense. So I need to visualize that again. Because people listen, you're 30 years old, you lose all your freaking money.
Yes.
You come here.
Terrible.
You got no business doing Girl and the Goat and all this stuff. And you come in and you guys have one of the most historic.
We went on a pretty nice run from Boka all the way, so then we did Belena and we did Jay Parker and Elaine's at Hotel Lincoln, and we did, we did Girl and the Goat, Little Goat, and Duck Duck Goat. We did Swift and Sons, and we did GT Fish and GT Prime. That was a really nice run of opening up restaurants that had really great financial models and worked, and as we were building the company, and it was life changing. Yeah.
And I think it's important, the fact that you lost. See, people always tend to look at the loss as such a bad thing, but I feel like had you not lost, don't you think you had a different perspective?
Oh yeah, best thing that ever happened to me. If you can be a good detective and you can look in the mirror and you can say, I f***ed that up. Yeah. John didn't f*** that up. Mary didn't f*** that up. I f***ed that up. And it took me a little while to get there, but I eventually got there. But if you look at, so all that stuff happens. I'm 40 years old about the time Girl and the Goat opens. And so 40, 41, 42 is where my life really changed. But there was a lot of pain in between where it was 20 years. Yeah, it was an overnight success in 20 years. Yeah. They're like, oh, these young guys that just opened this place. And they're like, no. This took a long time to get to this point. When we were about to open Girl and the Goat, we started to get pretty optimistic about it. We opened up the books, and first 3 months sold out an open table. And we're like, this might be better than we think it is. You know, we performed it at like 4.5 million. That's what we thought we were going to do. And we went and looked at GT Fish's building. There was key money that we had to put down to get it. It was a great lease, and nobody was opening up restaurants right then. Nobody could raise money. It was very, very difficult. The economy sucked. And we went in and we bought that lease. We locked the door. I walked out. Rob looked at me and he goes, this is either our slingshot move and we're going to be a huge success, or our kids are going to be paying for their own college. I'll never forget that moment. Following week, we had a garage sale of all the stuff that had been in there for like Tizzy Malou, and it was Rob and I putting price tags on chairs and stuff like that. It's not that long ago. Yeah. You know, this is, you know, 11, 12 years ago. Yeah. No, it was, I mean, what is it? 13 years ago in July. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's been a really crazy run of stuff. And now 30 years since my first restaurant and 20 years since Boka. Boka's about to turn 20 years old.
Wow. Almost happy anniversary for Boka.
Thank you.
You know, so even I'm trying to put the math together. Even when you're 34, 35, it's not like you had millions saved.
No.
But this is why I love doing this, because I swear when you go to Boka website, when you go to your restaurants,
yep.
When I posted you and I wanted the audience, so like next week I'm doing the founder of Equinox Fitness.
Yes.
Same thing. Everyone's so excited, and her and I were talking offline. And it's like everyone's like not thinking about the fact that you were almost 35 and didn't really have money.
No.
But it's so cool to look now. You own all of Chicago. You're the hottest hospitality group literally in maybe in the U.S.
I don't know about that, but yes, it does take a long time to get there. And I think I do see a lot of people come out with pro formas for their first restaurant. And I look at it and I'm like, dude, what are you doing trying to raise $3 million in your first restaurant? Yeah. I mean, you know, listen, people have done it. I shouldn't discourage that. People have done it and been very successful. But to me, it does take a little while. And even if you catch lightning in a bottle with the first place, keeping your middle class sensibility about you, which I did not when I went to Nashville, is, I think, really super important to still be deliberate.
Sure.
You know, I opened in 92, 95, 97, 03, and then Landmark in 05 was the first time I had 2 restaurants at once. I've been opening and selling restaurants. So owning 1 restaurant, 2 restaurants, 5 restaurants, 10 restaurants, 20 restaurants, and 30 restaurants, those are 8 different companies. Every time you change and get bigger, you've got to mix it up and change again. And so back to imposter syndrome, you got to constantly monitor yourself not reaching your Peter principle. So Peter principle is everybody elevates their level of incompetency. And so just because you can run a company that's 100 million doesn't mean you can run a company that's $250 million. They're all different. And it, you know, the restaurant business gets harder every single year.
Yes.
I mean, there are days that I feel like I got punched in the face all day. And there are days when I feel like I just went to a party and had a blast. So
it just depends. You got to take the good with the bad days. And
you do.
Interesting, that concept you mentioned. I spoke with the chief economist of Walmart, and there's this idea of economies of scale where it's like this idea where you did really good in this one segment, and now let's take List Select and open it up in California. If it did this good here, it's got to do that good in California. When it's not the case, like economies of scale is. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, just because you see seated in one place doesn't mean that you're gonna succeed in everything. Yeah. Man, I am so smart. That skill's going to be transferable to here, and I do believe in transferable skills. But yeah, you got to keep your wits about you.
Yeah. So what I'm really curious, what business lesson can we learn from you and your co-founder saw that Girl on the Go was going to be successful?
Yeah.
What I mean, obviously Open Table, the audience, you know, they told you basically how good it was going to be. But what else, when you guys were launching, differentiated you guys? Because at the same time that you guys did that, I'm sure there's other restaurants that failed that year.
Yeah, you know, I mean, there was a big kind of open highway, but the thing with Girl on the Go was Stephanie was so marketable.
Okay.
She had just won Top Chef, and we had decided to do a ramp up to not lose that heat of these wandering goat dinners. And we would announce them the day of, and it would be a secret location, and we'd put them online. They'd sell out in 30 seconds. And then an hour before, we'd tell the people where there was going to be. So it would be this dinner in a church, or it would be at Art Smith's house or wherever. And we just slowly unpeeled the onion of what Girl on the Go was going to be. until it opened. And then I'd never seen anything like that. I'd never been part of a restaurant that did 600 dinners every single night. You know, so that was some rare air. And you were like, okay, great. Let's just do this every time. And what you find out is that's impossible to blueprint.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, ask singers, do you know when you've written a hit song? They're almost always no. You know, Bob Seger's liner notes, it says under Night Moves, it says, people always ask me, do you know when you've written a hit song? He goes, the answer has always been no, except for this one. And so there's a little bit of that. Like, I think we knew that was probably the restaurant that I was the most sure of that was going to be successful. You know, I come from a family that was always fearful at any moment that everything was going to be lost. And I think Rob kind of operates that way a little bit too. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like we're total pessimists, but I think we're just careful, you know?
Okay. And what's, you know, let's walk through, you guys have over 30 now with Boka specifically?
Well, I know, I think, I don't know. We're like 25 restaurants right now. Yeah.
What's the, you know, something that's very popular is everyone wants to know about like the most popular revenue wise and what's the lowest. So what's the highest grossing from the restaurant group?
Well, I'll talk about it. I'll talk about a little bit. Some of it's like advertised, you know, like if you look at the 100 highest grossing restaurants in America, I think Swift and Sons is number 40 on that list.
Really? Wow.
You know, we do 24 million at the Hoxton Hotel. There are nights when we do 3,500 people at the Hoxton. You know, I think we have 8 restaurants that do more than $10 million.
Wow.
So we do some restaurants that put up some high grosses, as does several companies in Chicago, as does Gibson's Dynamic, One-Off Hospitality, Let Us Entertain You, Hog Salt. I mean, there's so many great restaurants and great companies in Chicago, and there's so many great small restaurants in Chicago putting out incredible food in small atmospheres, like, you know, everything from, you know, Beverly Kim and Johnny Clark's restaurants, Parachute, to Oriole, to Smith, John and Karen Shields, who I think John Shields takes more chances than anybody. You know, Grant Achatz, incredible, Bayless, Carrie and Michael Nahabidian. There's legends around every corner, you know. I mean, like stuff that pushes us all the time too. I love Donnie Medea and I are very close friends. He's One-Off Hospitality. He's, you know, Blackbird, Avec, and Publican Quality Meats and Publican. And we're putting on actually a show together called the Welcome Conference. Welcome Conference was started in New York by Will Guidara, who wrote Unreasonable Hospitality. He's one of my dearest friends in the world. I talk to him every couple of days. He just happens to be married to Christina Tosi, who owns Milk Bar. And he started the Welcome Conference a decade ago, and I spoke at it, and I think it was 2018 I spoke at it, or 17, and I loved it. One of the great experiences of my life. It was in Lincoln Center. It's 8 hours of hospitality, but the people who speak are not necessarily hospitality people. It's like Alan Mulally, the CEO of Ford and Boeing. It's Seth Meyers from Saturday Night Live. It's Gary Vee, who's got, you know, 10 million followers on Instagram. But it all comes back to hospitality in a way. So our lineup this year is incredible. It's going to be at the Harris Theater. Piper Perabo, who's in Yellowstone and was in Coyote Ugly, but also owns Jack's wife Frida and Employees Only in New York, is going to speak. Tasha Smith, one of the great directors, great actress. Jason Hamill, the chef. Caroline Stein, the restaurateur in Los Angeles. Katie Button, the James Beard Award-winning chef in Asheville. Eric Williams from Virtue. Alpana Singh. It is a really incredible lineup of people. Sam Cass, who is Obama's chef and nutrition advisor. I mean, we just got a bunch of legends on that roster, and it's such a fun setup. You go in, you have breakfast, and then go sit and listen to 4 speakers, come out, have lunch. It's a unbelievable day, and if anybody's looking to fill their cup up, that's the day to do it. Every year when I go to New York and go to Welcome, I come out inspired and ready to kick ass, and it doesn't matter if you're in the real estate business, restaurant business, finance, I don't care what. These people are inspiring, and the lessons are transferable.
And just sitting here with you over the last hour, I can see that. So for people that are interested in that, I'm going to post the descriptions and I'll share it on social media. Because that sounds like an amazing conference.
Yeah.
It's every year, right?
It's every year, yeah.
Awesome. And so aside from that, the real reason I asked you about the revenue is because on the flip side of that, have you guys had businesses or restaurants that haven't done as well that you have had to close?
Yeah, we've closed restaurants before. Sure. You do this long enough and you open up enough of them, you're going to. Some of them just have a life cycle. GT Fish was open for 13 years. It had an incredible run. But a lot of times restaurants have the laws of diminishing returns. You get to a certain point, it just slowly goes down. It gets a little less and gets a little less. And that was one of those restaurants that just hit a point. Boka's at 20 years is doing more than it ever has. So like I said, you can't exactly blueprint it. Belmore, won Rob Report's best new restaurant in America. And 2 years later, because of the pandemic, had to close. It was just kind of like too fine dining for that time. The food really didn't translate to like delivery food, and it became Alavita, and Alavita is a huge success. So that's great. So yeah, we've had things that just didn't quite work. Landmark was so much clubbier than anything else we did. So we turned it into Milena. So there's been a lot of things that have turned into something else.
I mean, you have to, a lot of times in business, you have to pivot, right? And if you don't,
you do.
Yeah.
You do. If you think I don't know what the percentage of restaurants that make their 20th birthday, but I guarantee it's 0 point something. It's 0.0 something, I mean, it's like, I think there's like, 10% of restaurants hit their 5th birthday. I mean, they're crazy stats. But you hope all of them get to 20. I mean, I can kind of look at the ones that I know that are going to go to 20 years old. I mean, the Momentaros and Swifts and Girl and the Goats and Duck Duck Goats of the world that just, each and every year, put up the same numbers. It's
Yeah. And which, by the way, for people listening, if you haven't been to Momotaro, you have to go. That's a consistent one for me.
Oh, thanks,
one of my favorites.
We love it.
Yeah. And okay, so, you have some restaurants that close, you have the ones that continue to shine.
Yeah.
Is there, over the last 10 years, you guys have self-financed this. That's amazing. But there's stuff, as you mentioned, that are out of your control. Pandemic hits, COVID-19.
Did you hear that? Did you hear the exhale out there, everybody? That was my COVID exhale. It's what I have to do every time I hear it and think about it because it was painful. For me personally, especially, March 14th of 2020, my mom passed away. March 15th of 2020, they shut down all the restaurants. So I was having a crisis within a crisis. The best thing that happened to me during that time was the fact that 17 of us jumped on a phone call to start the Independent Restaurant Coalition, and it became like a support group. At times we had 300 operators on our Zoom calls. We eventually got $28.6 billion in funding through the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which we initiated with some great help from Earl Blumenauer and was part of the CARES Act. But that was our whole purpose in getting in there, was first shaping PPP, and then after that, starting a fund for restaurants. But we were on the phone together every morning, sometimes 4 hours a day for, 12, 15 months. So I looked at those faces, Robert St. John and Katie Button and Will Guidera and Donnie Medea and Ivy Mix and Ashley Christensen, Michael Shemtoff. I looked at these people every day. We were all fighting through it. And in the restaurants, we have pre-shift. We get up and we tell stories or taste food or talk about guests who are coming in before the shift every night. Those days were about post-shift. And all of us getting on there and talking about our fears and where we were, and we're down to this much money and we think we're going to go out of business. And people talked about, I remember Donnie being on there, crying, talking about closing Blackbird. It was a time where there was a lot of laughter and a lot of tears, even some yelling at times. I mean, we were in a foxhole together, and those people will be friends for life. But navigating through all that, we had restaurants where we paid $1 million a year in rent that we didn't get a break on. And we had to go to our banks, and we lit up a line of credit that was a dangerous and scary number. And I got into one of the worst spots in my life. I talked a little bit before about being a manic depressive my whole life. Probably the darkest moment of my life was in in late 2020 in California, just by myself. And it was without having the thing that had sustained me for so long. And there was just so much consternation and anger in the world. And it wreaked havoc on my psyche. As I think it did for a lot of people. I know it was bad for a lot of people's psyche. I'm not special in that case. I had to scratch and crawl to get through it.
Yeah.
Just like a lot of people did.
March 14th, you said you lose your mother.
Yeah.
And then obviously we see, was it a couple days later, Trump announced they're banning travel, and we see the trend of,
Pritzker shut down restaurants from being open on March 16th. So March 14th, she passed away. We couldn't have a funeral. March 15th, I went to my restaurant, Springfield, Illinois, that I opened, that she opened with me and helped me. And her paintings were on the wall. I had asked her to paint these blue dogs on the wall. And so I was like, well, we can't have a funeral, so let's go to Indigo because we'll be surrounded by our paintings. So we go and we sit down at a table, and the new owners come by the table and they say, hey, we're so sorry about your mom. And he goes, tell me a story about the blue dogs again. And I was like, well, I'd seen Rodriguez Blue Dogs in New Orleans. And I was like, Mom, will you paint me copies of these? And she painted one perfectly. And I said, give me 17 of them. So they were everywhere. And he goes, what was your favorite one? I said, that one right there in the field of poppies. It was this huge painting. And the new owner went and he grabbed it off the wall. And he goes, well, it's going home with you guys tonight. And he gave me the painting. And so that was a moment in my life where I probably needed hospitality the most and got it just at the right time. And that thing's in my house now, so it's pretty special.
Yeah, that's a powerful painting. I mean, Kevin, I think this is for me the more fascinating part of chatting with you, because the story about Girl on the Goat's awesome. The millions, the revenue, where you guys are at now, but the reality is it's these life-defining moments that you have. I mean, you not only lose your mother, which I'm sure was one of the toughest things ever in your life. Boka Group was big enough where you have responsibility for these employees. People have mortgages, people have health insurance, I'm sure.
Yes.
How do you manage, like, the world's shutting down? We've never seen a crisis like this. It's different than '08 because it's a different reasoning.
Yes.
Was Boka at any point at the brink of bankruptcy?
No, but so going back to the very beginning though, when we shut down all the restaurants, so we said we extended everybody's health coverage throughout the entirety. We never shut that off. We also at the very beginning were just like, who has needs right now that might not get met? And we were just on Amazon sending people things that they might need. It was only like a group of like 8 of us that were still working. And then, Rob and I donated $200,000 to a relief fund. And we then started raising money from our guests to put in that relief fund as well. And then we had people who could fill out stuff and say, I need money for relief. And then we were sending out checks. And so that was the triage in the beginning to try to get people through. And then we set up at 3 different of our restaurants, places that people could pick up food once a week. And so it was really, that was all going on. At the same time, we just watched this line of credit getting lit up. And we're just like, what if this whole PPP thing doesn't work? Or if we don't get it? I don't want to say the brink because there were too many unknowns, but there was a certain point where like, if we don't get PPP, we're in big trouble. And so I had to just start thinking in my own mind, okay, I'll be okay. What are we going to do here? Okay, this is what we'll do. All right. I'll work at that family video that's out there, in Michigan, or whatever. I mean, I started thinking of some crazy stuff, well, maybe we'll move to the country and, are restaurants ever going to come back? I mean, people kept saying that. So it gets in your head. Like when I was sitting and just thinking rational, I would just be like, restaurants are coming back. They're coming back. As long as people are attracted to people, there's going to be restaurants. People want to go out and see people and be with people and talk with people. But there would be every single day, like restaurants will never be the same. Nobody's coming back to restaurants. And
every day on the news.
Every day on the news. And you would be like, shut up, man. Stop saying that. The takeout was a drop in the bucket. It was, restaurants, we weren't a hardware store, my inventory was not still sitting on the shelves. Yeah. We'd have to go every time they shut us down, like throw out all the food. Freeze what you can, throw everything else out. Here we go again. It was a complete and total disaster. But, fortunately, between PPP and the RRF, which we got a little bit of, brought us back to life. And, there were people that weren't lucky enough to get it and figure it out. On 100,000 restaurants closed. There were 500,000 independent restaurants and 100,000 of them closed.
Wow. And you mentioned this was the darkest point in your life, correct?
Yep. I have two moments that are close. One was after Nashville closing. And that was Halloween 2002 and late 2020 during the pandemic.
I know you guys mentioned the group you guys had on the Zoom call with operators every day. Yeah. Who does Kevin turn to in time of despair? Like, who's your person? I'm fortunate to have a couple of things. One, I have 3 amazing, beautiful children, Sophia, Lola, and Luca, who are amazing and who we have really open conversations with and can talk about anything. And, Courtney, who I've been with for, 20 years, and then like 6 brothers, like not real brothers, but like I have my best friend has been my best friend since I was 3 years old. I had dinner with him last night. We went to preschool together, and we're 50 years in and we're still best friends. And so, between him and Will Guidera and Joe Fisher, who I co-own Beyond with, and Rob Katz, my partner in Boka Group, and a guy named Scott Alderson. I have these guys that are, that all have a different purpose in my life. And I forgot one, Oliver Pettit at the Red Bar, and he owns a Red Bar in Seaside, Florida. Those 6 guys are my lifelines for a lot of things, and I call them for all different purposes. And so it's important to have people. Yeah. You don't need 6. Sometimes you only need 1, but I don't know how to tell you about it. I have a couple of things that I keep on a piece of paper that I always look at. And one of them is the list of people in my life that I know have my back. It's in my notes section of my phone. When you're really like, when I am struggling to get in those moods, like looking at that list of people that that are your family, both earned family and real family. Yeah. I think that's powerful. That's something that everyone should do when you have an intrinsic connection where there's nothing like extrinsic you're getting from it, right?
Yeah.
It's that personal connection. I mean, I think it's so empowering to know where you're sitting at the seat of the table to have moments like that, because again, the imposter syndrome, the concept there. Now, there's going to be people, no doubt, listening to this. The one thing I can guarantee is everyone listening to this is going to go through something hard. I heard this one thing though, that they said that, if you took everyone's shit and you put it in front of everyone, you'd take every problem you had back. That was your personal problem.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you, for people that are listening in that have gone through trauma, that are having trauma, that might have lost their life savings, might have lost a loved one, might have lost a spouse to whatever. I mean, what advice can you give people to bounce back from their darkest moments?
Well, first of all, don't try to do it on your own. I mean, the lowest hanging fruit for people who suffer from depression or just even, anxiety, irrational anxiety, is there is good medication for those type of things, but there is amazing people to talk to. And there are free resources to talk to. So one, I was a fucking idiot and did not get therapy until I was, for 50 years, which bums me out, because once I did also get medicated, my life was a lot better. And the only thing that bummed me out about being on medication was like, why didn't I do this a long time ago? Mm-hmm. And so there are resources, and take them. And I think everybody has a recipe for themselves that they know works. I have that sheet of paper that has my currency of success on it, but under it is also my rules for life. And I have a bunch of rules on there. And if I stick to those rules, and they're like, make sure you are either on a yoga mat or working out 5 or 6 days a week. You know, don't, you know, I don't drink very much anymore. So it's like, don't ever drink more than this in this amount of setting. You know, if I follow all those rules, I make sure everything that I'm doing goes back to those currencies of success, I can stay in a good headspace. But I think people don't set goals, don't set priorities, and don't set rules for themselves. You know, people used to do New Year's resolutions. Do a New Year's recipe. This is the recipe where the best me comes out. And I think everybody knows what brings out the best of them and the worst of them. But sometimes what brings out the worst of them is really easy to do. Yeah. It's really easy to go out and have 8 cocktails. It's really easy to eat like there's no tomorrow. I've done both of those things. Yeah. You know?
Likewise. I think, and here's the reality. To that point too, happiness, you know, to open up the amount of restaurants you guys did, you have to have a sense of ambition. If you don't have ambition, you wouldn't be where you're at today.
Yes.
Is there, you know, are you motivated, like, as you look now for your next decade, are you like, does money motivate you? What motivates you?
You know, anybody that really knows me knows I'm not motivated by money. I never really have been. It's kind of why, you know, all I cared about at the beginning was like my restaurants being nice. That's why I would just take all the money and put it back on black. You know, it was like I was playing roulette and it was like, what? You hit 7? Yeah. Put it all on 7 again. That's never been a thing. I mean, listen, money's nice. I'm not going to act like it, you know, it allows you the freedoms sometimes to do the things and pursue the things you'd like to pursue. But I'm certainly not driven by it. I hope it doesn't drive any decisions that I'm doing the rest of my life. I want to do things that are soulful. I know how I want to like finish my life. I want to have a house somewhere where the people that I care about can come up and stay with me for a week. And then I can use all the hospitality skills that I've used my entire life in restaurants at this house where I can take care of people. But they're people that I know. Supermensch is this incredible documentary about a guy who used to be a music manager. He's Alice Cooper's manager, Shep Gordon. That's what Shep does. He's got a place in Hawaii. And like anytime any of his friends go through shit, like, you know, Michael Douglas went through a divorce, you know, he went and slept in Shep's guest room for 2 weeks and they like cooked dinner every day and they surfed. That's why I don't know when that'll start. I don't know if that starts when I'm 60 or 65 or what, but that's the goal at the end. That's on the horizon, is this house in the middle of nowhere that somebody calls me and is like, man, bro, I'm just going through a rough time. There was a death in my family. I'm like, come on up. Come spend 7 days with me. Wow. Let's get it back.
Wow.
Let's get life back.
Wow.
So that's the end goal.
I feel like that just illuminates in the success of Boka Group, because what you're saying there illuminates the culture you guys have. You know, I've been to many of your restaurants, and I think that sense of hospitality and like, come here and come enjoy this experience, it's a reflection of your life and how you do it personally, not just professionally.
No, well, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, you know, listen, there are a lot of people out there that don't just live it inside their 4 walls. Like, one of the greatest guys in Chicago is Eric Williams from Virtue, and he just texted me the other day and he was like, where are you? And I'm like, I'm at Beyond. And he was like, he goes, stay there. He came in and he gave me a gift. He's just like, you know, thanks for taking my phone calls. I appreciate it. I got you a gift. I mean, a lot of people in my business, they're the most generous humans on earth. That's why I love restaurant people so much. Like, Jerry Seinfeld only loves comedians. You ever heard him talk about that before? Like, he likes his family, I think, but only other people he likes are comedians. Yeah. I like restaurant people, and part of it is because they're generous people.
Yeah. And on the restaurant concept, do you invest in other restaurant groups? Do you mentor restaurant owners?
Certainly do a lot of taking meetings with people. No, I don't invest in other restaurants, but I take a lot of meetings with people and give advice. Yeah, for sure.
And from all those meetings, the micro 30, 60 second, what's someone listening to this might be launching a restaurant soon or might be raising capital to launch a restaurant. What's the best piece of advice you can give someone who wants to launch a restaurant?
Well, just be deliberate about it. You know, like, everything you don't know, try to figure it out beforehand. Like, I mean, like, yes, I kind of was building the plane while I was flying it, but I got really lucky, and you could do that, I think, easier 30 years ago than you can now. Figure it all out in that first restaurant, man. If you can, if you can do it with some middle-class sensibility. Don't raise a bunch of money. Open up something that's small. Pour over every plate. Find your footing at somewhere where you can just every night kill every guest, build up your reputation, both financially and within the restaurant. And then from there, if you want to be more ambitious than that, go. I mean, the best thing I ever did was open up a 24-seater followed by a 50-seater. I got to get those down first before I tried to go and do a big restaurant. And even with Nashville, I went too big too fast. So it's an education and it's a climb, and just like, you got lots of time. Yeah. Don't be too quick to like jump into, a blockbuster film. Make your little handheld indie film first before you try to go all Jerry Bruckheimer,
Yeah, you have to. I mean, it's measured steps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Measured steps. Well, as I know we're getting into the conclusion here shortly, but right before I get into that, we covered most of the marks about Boka, and this has been a master. Interestingly enough, I went into this with no expectation because I know your background. There's so much there. And to see where it went, not only was it a master class on the business side, but I think more important than that is like your energy and the mindset and the mental part. That's stuff that's not talked about enough, and I know people will appreciate that. So thank you for being vulnerable.
No, hey, listen, the word restaurant comes from restoration, and the restoration of other people's souls. And it's pretty hard to restore other people's souls if you haven't restored your own soul. So if you're a sprinter, you have a diet and you train and you stretch and you do all those things. If you're a restorer of souls, you should spend time every day restoring your own. Mm. That's part of your that's part of your preparation for what you do.
Yeah, that's extremely powerful. Well, the last business questions I have for you, because we didn't touch on them, is I want to ask you about Beyond your club. But what is that?
It's a 30,000 square foot private club for mind, body, and soul. It's got a couple restaurants inside of it. It has 6 doctors attached to it. It's got a full-time internist, psychiatrist, chiropractor, naturopath, doctor of Chinese medicine, all in-house. Full blood lab in-house. It's got a listening room with 2,000 records in it. It's got a nap room with a Haston bed, infrared sauna, 2 beautiful locker rooms, an incredible gym, 2 massive yoga studios, all like with really design forward. It's beautiful. It's on the Riverwalk in the 600 West Chicago building where Groupon used to be. It's $4,000 a year as a membership, and that includes all your fitness classes and all your yoga classes. It's really spectacular place. It's changed a lot of people's lives in there. It even saved someone's life. One of our members had some numbness in his right leg, went to our doctor of Chinese medicine. She's a really powerful healer. And after seeing him for 5 minutes said, you need to go up and see our internist and get a full blood lab. Did a blood test. She saw some irregularities, called our medical director, said she was going to do an MRI. He said, do a CAT scan, lesion on his kidney, removed 50% of his kidney 2 weeks later, saved his life.
What?
So there's this whole holistic medicine going on that there's so many things we can do because everyone's talking to each other.
Yeah.
So you can walk into that space. And there are people that want everything. There are people that just went through a terrible experience in their life, and they're like, give me the life coach, give me the psychiatrist, give me the trainer 5 days a week, give me the naturopath. I need to be on a good diet, and I need an executive physical. And, people can get truly nursed back to health, or just a standard of health every single week. So that place keeps me upright.
Yeah. It's interesting. My follow-up question was going to be, what differentiates you from like an East Bank club or a Soho House?
I think I just told you. It's definitely, one magazine called us the most complete wellness private club that exists in the world. Oh. I think it is. I don't think there's anything quite like it that exists on the planet. It's here in Chicago. I have amazing partners, Joe, Robbie, and Mar. Karen Harold, who designed it, did a beautiful job. Angelo Costas is our medical director, one of the best doctors in Chicago. It's a cool place. And we're about to expand, actually next week, 10,000 more square feet. That is like now co-working. So you can turn it into a co-working hybrid space. So if anybody hears this, and they want to come out, and they want to be my guest, just send me a message on Instagram and say that I heard you on the podcast, and I'd love to be a guest for a day, and come on out and be a guest.
Well, we'll make sure to put all that detail in the podcast so people can
I
ping
love
you.
that.
That's very generous of you. You know, I was going to ask you about that because why get into that space? You know, you guys were focused as restaurants. Obviously, you have restaurants in there, but it sounds like also what I heard for the last hour why you did it too.
Well, because we're all evolutions, right? We should be evolving. If we're doing it right, we're evolving as humans, and that's what I had evolved into. And I opened up something that mirrored who I'd become.
Yeah.
You know, at one point that was just restaurants, but you know, now my life is a lot like Beyond too.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Well, and then, you know, last business question for you, Boka.
Yes.
That's the flagship. That is the one.
Yes.
You don't go 13 years consecutively with a Michelin. What is it? Michelin
Star, 13 consecutive years. Yeah.
So many business lessons people can learn for their own life or even relationship lessons. How do you do that consecutively for 13 years?
Well, and we've been open for 20, you know, Lee Wolin is our executive chef partner there, and he's an incredible operator. We have an incredible team there. That whole team's amazing. Their flags are pointed in the same direction. They are dedicated to giving, you know, great service, great hospitality, great food every single night. But you know, leadership comes from the top. Lee does an amazing job. I have an immense amount of respect for him. And you know, that restaurant especially feels like home. You know, there's so many memories inside that place. Like, it's like, you know, I can remember everybody from that opening staff. And it's like Billy Joel's Piano Man. You know, Paul was a real estate novelist. You know, we had Nate, who was the real estate novelist, who was behind our bar. And we did have a waitress practicing politics. You know, I mean, it was like, it just, there's so much history there with that restaurant. I'm a super nostalgic guy. So every time I walk in that door, I can see my 3 kids running around in that dining room, like during the day before service. I can remember, you know, when Sophia was born, my wife was pregnant at the opening. I can remember her driving and parking behind the restaurant. And I would eat family meal in the car before pre-ship just so I could spend time with Sophia. I mean, just like, yeah, great memories. If you've never been to Boka before, we are open 7 days a week, 1729 North Halstead. Reservations can be had on opentable.com.
I love that. That was perfectly done.
Do you like my radio voice right there?
You have the podcast voice.
By the way, when I opened up Indigo in Springfield, I did a really silly radio ad, and at the end of the radio ad, it was like now open in Springfield on the West Side, Indigo Restaurant. And then at the end of the commercial, I went, Indigo, bringing the world to Springfield. If anybody has a copy of that anywhere, please send that over.
I would like to hear that too, so we could put it on the start of this. Yeah. Remind the audience. That is really good. Well, if you haven't, I hope this podcast made it clear you guys need to go to one of the restaurants in the Boka group. There's so many, so you can have a field trip for the next quarter of just going through all your different restaurants. And now Bien, which I'm personally going to check out because that's intriguing. So I really like what you're building there too.
Thanks. We just opened a Toko and Little Goat and Gigi's Chicken on Southport in the old Southport lanes.
Okay.
And that's been open just a few months, and Le Select's been open just a few months. Most nights you can find me at either one of those places, and hope to see you there. I'm still walking dining rooms.
How many hours are you working a week?
70.
70? Still, today?
Yeah.
Does it feel like work?
Yeah, sometimes. Honestly, yeah, the right answer would be like, no, when you do something you love, it's like, yeah, some of it's work, man.
Yeah.
Some of it's real work. Like, you know, it's not all touching tables and kissing babies. It's spreadsheets and invoices and P&Ls and phone calls and sit downs, and it's real labor, man.
Yeah.
And so everything's got an earning process in life. You know, it's like paying into a pension. And so everything that I've ever had in life that's been worth it tested me at some point. Mm-hmm. Don't matter, you know, kids, marriage, business, friendship, you know, they all go through hard things, and that's a sign that it's worth it. If it's kicking your ass, some people quit and they're like, well, no, I didn't sign up for this. No, it's exactly what you fucking signed up for. You signed up for something that was worth it. So if it's testing you, take it as a sign it's worth it. I've been tested a bunch of times, probably get tested next week. And so that's what I take from it, is that it's worth it.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're running away from pain, why not at least get a reward from it? Like, you're already pushing into it.
100%.
Take a reward from it.
Lean in.
Yeah, lean into it. So in closing, I ask every guest this. Now it's sort of fitting because of the timing. We're at the end of May here. A lot of kids are graduating college. You have 3 beautiful kids yourself.
1 in college.
There you go. So imagine today, I'm putting you on the spot, you're giving a commencement speech. What is your 60 to 90 commencement speech, knowing where we're at in this generation too, for the specific type of Gen Zs and, even the kids, your kids your age, you see it live. What does Kevin give?
I've given a couple commencement speeches,
okay.
So
good.
that
60-second one.
60-second. I would say figure out what you want to do specifically. If you want to be a chef, it's not enough to say, I want to cook food. Figure out if you want to cook progressive Korean food and you want to do that in Logan Square at a 40-seater. The more specific you are about what you want to do, the more you will be able to find someone exactly who can help you and get you there. The broader you are, the more of a chance you are just going to fall into something and not choose it. Just like choosing a mate, you know the kind of person that you want, know which job you want. And it's not enough to just say, I want to go into dermatology. It's that I want to go into dermatology and I really want to do it with this group of people and this price point and this kind, and I do want to do plastics or whatever it is. Be specific and figure it out. Take some time thinking about it. Mm-hmm. So many people that are at college, they're just like, I don't know what I want to do yet. I'm still just doing this, or I'm still just liberal arts. Take some time, man. Take some time every day and think about it and find that person. You don't have to recreate the wheel that's doing the job that you want to do. Then go pursue that person. It's like the people that jump on your podcast for mentorship. Find those mentors. They will either talk you in or talk you out of doing it.
Absolutely. Well, Kevin, I'm scared of failing. What should I do? Someone tells me.
Well, it's so funny. People always say to me, they're like, oh my God, dropping out of college, that was so courageous. I go, what was courageous about it? I was broke and I was freaking 19 years old. All I had to do, I just would have ended up back in the same place again. Yeah, you're never going to get anywhere. If you're thinking about doing something else and you're scared of failing, well, you're already in a bad place because you're thinking about doing something else. Which bad place do you want to be in? Choose your pain. At least with you trying, you're establishing your control of the situation. The other one, I have no control. Life's just going to happen to me. Life's supposed to happen for you, not to you. You're not a victim. Jump out there. I was on a plane with somebody the other day who worked for Louis Vuitton. She wanted to do her own thing. And she was like, yeah, I really have this great idea, but I'm scared to jump off the cliff. I'm like, you're 25 with a ridiculous resume. I go, you are going to find a job when you come back if it doesn't work. And she just 2 weeks ago sent me a message and was like, I'm taking your advice. I'm leaving. This is on an airplane.
Yeah, on the plane too.
I don't get to that many conversations on an airplane. We were supposed to converse, I guess.
Yeah.
But
not surprised with your personality. That's normal.
Maybe.
Well, life is supposed to happen
for you,
not to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so many of us unfortunately live in just let it happen. So I'm glad you had that. Even
you can fail at what you didn't want to do. Mm-hmm. So you might as well take a chance on what you do want to do. Most people choose what they do out of fear disguised as practicality.
Yeah. That's powerful.
Don't be that person.
Yeah. You know what's funny about you saying that? I'm gonna put this. I have this one listener that because I've been talking about it for a few weeks now. It's been on the roadmap. One listener reached out and said, I followed him now. I saw that he posted about the personal assistant role that he was looking for, and sends me a message yesterday saying, hey, can I send him a message? I'm kind of scared. I said, scared for what? What are you scared of? At this point, and just listening to your interview, I hope when she listens to it, it serves as a reminder. And I'm pretty sure she sent you the email today.
She sent me an email. Okay, I got it today. And I was like, how did she know from the podcast? I was like, oh my God, he must have posted something and she must follow.
Leading up to it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there we go.
You know what? Yeah. She's gonna get it. She's gonna get an interview on Tuesday. I'm gonna send her a message. I'm interviewing people on Tuesday. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. I love that, man. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate what you're doing there. So I mean, this has been a masterclass in so many ways in one. And I mean it. I'm not just saying this on the podcast, but
thanks,
you know, doing mayors and founders. This is really powerful to me because I feel like I got a therapy session.
I'm glad.
Learning, and a reminder, therapy is important. It's so taboo. People think it's like, you know, I don't know why.
Oh man, everybody's at the gym, everybody's at the yoga, everybody's working out their bodies. Is your mind even just as important or more important than your body? Therapy's just workout for your mind.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah, that's exactly how it goes. Well, I'm going to put all the descriptions below. You got to make a promise to come back in a year when your book launches.
You got it.
I want the book here so we can
pleasure.
see it. I'm looking forward to reading it. People, if they want to find you, obviously you're at your restaurants. They can follow you on Instagram. You have this event coming up. I'll put the Eventbrite links. Anything else that I'm missing that we should be, that links wise?
That's it. Yeah. Book, Bottomless Cup, Private Club, Beyond, Restaurants, BokaGRP.com. Find me on Instagram. See you around Chicago. I love Chicago, Illinois. Let's make this a better place. It starts with kindness. It starts with all of us being kind to other people.
Amen to that, guys. That is Kevin Boehm, the co-founder and co-CEO of the Boka Group. Make sure to follow him on Instagram. Make sure to go to one of his restaurants and make sure to let them know that you're here from the podcast. Kevin was our mentor today. Thank you for mentoring us. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks.